You know what would happen if I gave up the business stuff that I love to work on my GPA? My GPA would have been a half a point higher, and I would not be doing what I love with my life. I'd gotten so fixated on this idea that I was going to have this thing, I had stopped asking myself why. But God, you got to recognize the beauty of that medicine. Like, it's so flexible. And so what it is flexible. And then the things that are tangential to it are basically endless, like vet medicine's a house with 1,000,000 rooms.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. I still can't believe I got to interview Dr. Andy Roark. I have trouble finding words to share how much I admire his talents, wisdom, and heart. Not only is he an amazing general practice veterinarian, a highly sought after speaker, writer, podcast host of 2 podcasts, The Cone of Shame and Uncharted Vet, and founder of the Uncharted Veterinary Conferences, he is also an amazing storyteller and can slap on the perfect take-home lesson on any story. This is an incredible conversation with so much value, so let's welcome Dr. Andy Roark. At the beginning, when did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
When I washed out of graduate school and I didn't want to move away from my wife. That's when. I am definitely not one of those people who's like, I wanted to be a veterinarian from when I could walk. That's lovely and that's awesome. That's just not my story. I wanted to be a physician. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, and my dad was a small town doctor. And I watched the impact that he had on people in that profession, in that way. And I always wanted to be able to have an impact like that. And so I had always thought that I would be a doctor like my dad. And that was something that I aspired to, and I kind of kept working towards it. And then I ended up sort of watching how human medicine kind of evolved in the 80s and the 90s into the 2000s. It was very different than it was back when I was a kid, and I would look up at this, and I remember being a junior in college and getting ready for the MCAT and everything. And my dad said to me, Andrew, I don't think that I would do this today if I was starting over. And I was like, oh, well, I'm glad you, thanks for sharing that with me. I appreciate it. But I had kind of had those thoughts, and I had kind of looked, I'm kind of a pretty pragmatic person by nature. I'd seen a lot of discontented physicians but then, to have sort of the person that kind of was the model for me. And then also, let's be honest, the person I think at some level I really wanted to kind of impress. I think a lot of us really want to impress our parents. And I thought that was a way I could sort of do that. And to have that person go, I don't know that I would do this. That was pretty jarring. So I was kind of rudderless there for a little while. And here I am, and I've got a biology degree, and I've got a concentration in medical humanities. And I've got some, externship work and things like that. And suddenly I was like, I don't know about this. And so there I was. And I was dating this girl. She wanted to go to medical school, but she didn't want to go straight from college. So she found this program at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. And they have this, they call it the Post-Baccalaureate Fellowship Program. And it was for people who'd finished college, and they were going to take a year and do a fellowship at the NIH. And the beautiful part of it for me was that there was only one application. There are like hundreds and hundreds of labs at the NIH, but there's only one application. So what that means is that you fill out this generic application and you send it in, and then they all look at it. And then somebody will give you a call if they think that you're a fit, which is great because I had no idea what I was going to do. And I was like, maybe somebody will see this application and they'll know what I'm good at because I don't. And then they'll call me, and then I will find my passion. And so I sent this thing in, and I applied, and I got a call from the laboratory of National Institutes of Child Health and Human Development. And they were like, we think we'd like to have you come. And I went and I checked it out and everything. And it was only after I got there and I got the job that I found out how government budgets work. And the truth is, if you have a lab and they have money to hire an extern and they don't hire it, that money will get taken away. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they need you. It's just that they have money and they don't want to lose it. And so that was the case for me. So I get hired, I go to the NIH, and they're like, we really don't have a whole lot for you. Like they had me just doing some really basic stuff. And so I did that for a while and I was just miserable. And so I just started leaving. I would just leave at lunchtime. And so I would go in, I'd be like, what do you guys got? And I would do it. And then I would just go get on the metro and I would go downtown and I would volunteer at the National Zoo. And so at the end of the year, I got letters of recommendation from the NIH and from the National Zoo. And I was like, I kind of like the research stuff. I really like the animal stuff. And, I've always liked physiology. And so I applied to graduate school at the University of Florida because it was where my girlfriend was going. And I got into grad school and she got into med school and we broke up 3 weeks before I went to Florida. And so there I am at the University of Florida in graduate school. I don't know anybody. I'm like, what am I doing here? And the answer is you're meeting your wife at orientation is what you're doing. And so I met my wife at orientation and we've been married 20 years. And that was that. And so I always thought, so at that point, I thought I was going to be a college professor because I'm like, man, I get into this and I start doing it. And I love the classroom time. Like we were doing labs and I liked hanging out with the undergrads and just like, I like teaching, obviously like talking and telling stories. I like laughing. I like, and I got to do all that stuff. So, I'm going through my program. My research is kind of hit and miss and snagging. I actually worked with venomous snakes. I got in this lab and I was working with cottonmouths. And so I'm like catching them. I've got them in my house. Like it was just crazy times. But anyway, so I'm dating this girl. I've got snakes in my house. It's just absolutely out of control. And so anyway, if you ever want to know if you're really good at something, find someone else who's good at it and hang out with them. And I found out that by watching how good my wife was at sort of academia, that I was not that good at it. I was very good at the teaching part, but that's not the part of academia that academics care about. They were like, what is your research protocol and how are you getting grant money and are you publishing? And I would like submit articles to publish. And then these other people who were basically, it's called peer review because they're just your peers and they're just kind of crapping on your stuff. And I'm like, I don't know that you guys actually know what you're talking about. And it was just very frustrating to convince 3 people that my stuff should be published. And I'm like, what authority do you have here? And so anyway, there was all that kind of stuff. So finally, the writing was kind of on the wall for me, where I was like, yeah, the things I was good, which is the teaching that I really get excited about, those are not being prioritized. And I don't know that they're going to be prioritized. And my wife is crushing it. Like she's so brilliant. And I knew it'd be hard for 2 academics to get a job together. I know that's hard, especially when one of them is amazing and the other one is a fun guy to have in lab. And so that was kind of where I was. And so I was looking around and I just kind of ran an inventory on myself. And I was like, okay, Andy, what do we got going for us here? I do not want to leave Gainesville, Florida, because my wife has got at least another year in her program and we're married at this point and I don't want to leave. I wanted to keep doing physiology because I enjoyed it. I understood it. I liked systems. I liked how things work together. I really wanted to teach. I like people. I enjoy people. I wanted to make an impact on people and their families, which is what I saw my father doing from the time that I was a kid. And that always was with me of like to get around to this. And I think that was one of the big things that really bothered me in academia is there was 2 things. Number one, I definitely did not feel like I had that direct impact. I could kind of get that from the teaching, but like as far as like research and stuff, what I was doing was so far removed from something that would actually impact somebody, in a meaningful way. I wasn't discovering new medicines. I was tracking snake migrations. Like that was not the same. And the other part though this is the part that I really missed in academia, and it really bothered me, was the ability to put my hands on a problem and fix it and be like, ta-da, this thing was broken and now it's not. You had a problem and today I fixed it. Like, even if you did great stuff, it was still a year of doing research and publishing and blah, 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 which is the good old fashioned, put my hands on this thing and fix it. And I didn't realize how much that was a part of my personality and how much I wanted that until I didn't have it. And it just bothered me. And so I'm sitting back and I'm like, where do I go from here? I was like, well, I like animals. I like physiology. I've got good backgrounds on that. I've got a master's degree in zoology now. I like to teach. I like to work with people. I like to fix things with my hands and like make a tangible difference. And I want to make an impact on people. That medicine seemed like the obvious next thing for me to go and try. And so, completely naive, of how challenging it was to go to vet school. I just went to the vet school and I was like, hey, I'm your guy. I'm here. When do I get started? And I was naive. They mistook my naivete as confidence. And they were like, oh man, he's clearly, he clearly believes he's smart enough to be here. And I think they just went with it. I think they were just like, he thinks he's in. So let's just, I guess he is. And that's how I got into vet school. Only after I had put in all my stuff and interviewed and things did I come to understand from other people that what I had applied for was basically impossible. And I was wildly unqualified with my GPA to be able to get into this school. But I swear, I think the thing for me was I just walked in and I was like, yep, this is what I'm doing next. And they were like, no, oh, well, okay. And that's how I got into vet school.
I'm about to go speak to a bunch of pre-vet students. So that's what I'll tell them. Just walk in and say, I'm here.
Just manifest your future. It just, yep, that's it. I'll tell you this. I'll give you the advice that I always give to vet students or pre-vet students is be an interesting person, because there's a million people who are just super smart who blow the top out of their grades and they're like, yeah, I got straight A's and I volunteered in a vet clinic and I love animals. Don't tell them you love animals. Don't tell them you love animals. They're not interested in hearing it. Also, I'll just tell you, I talked to the dean at one of the vet schools, and I won't say which one, but I talked to the dean at one of the vet schools recently, and she's the dean of students. And I said, hey, people ask me what they need to do to get into vet school all the time. Do you have anything that they should be doing or not doing? And she said, don't write a euthanasia story. And I was like, what? And she said, yeah. She was like, there's a lot of applicants to vet school that write a euthanasia story about how they were affected. And this is clearly an important story for them. But she's like, you have no idea how many euthanasia stories we get. And so anyway, that's my two pieces of advice is consider not writing a euthanasia story when you apply, if you can avoid it. And number two is just be an interesting person. Just be like, what makes you different? What makes them go, oh, well, this person is not like the other people. I think for me, I walked in and I was like, I had a master's degree in zoology, and I'd worked at the National Institute of Health, and I'd worked at the National Zoo, and they were like, oh man, this guy's I got some research that was coming out. I'd worked with venomous snakes, and I think they were kind of like, this guy's kind of interesting. I was definitely not your regular run-of-the-mill dog and cat. Wanted to be a vet from the time I was born. I think honestly, the fact that I took this circuitous path and kind of stumbled around, and I just saw and did a bunch of kind of weird stuff. Like, there was a time in grad school we did this project with alligators. I was catching alligators off the front of a fan boat for like 6-9 months, like just going out and catching alligators. And they asked me about experiences I had, and I was just telling those stories, and they were like, oh, I think you need to come and be here. This is really cool. And so anyway, it was definitely not blowing the top off of the academics. It was just, I just kept doing stuff and kind of wandering around. You and I talked at the very beginning about kind of how careers shape up and things. And you're already starting to sort of see what probably the guiding message of mine is going to be. But it's just, you don't have to be the best, but you should be an interesting person. You should figure out what you enjoy and what you're good at. And you should figure out how to do more of it. And you should figure out what you don't enjoy and what you're not good at. And you should figure out how to do less of it. And you should repeat that and repeat it and repeat it. And that's really, basically, we can wrap the podcast right here. That's the best thing I got.
You're not getting rid of me that easily, huh?
Well, it is so interesting that you just said that phrase, because you're actually my second interview today. And she said the exact same thing. Yeah. That was how she figured out where she wanted to go. Was she just started with, what do I like? What do I not like? Do more of what you like, do less of what you don't like. And that little percent will eventually get you to where you want to go.
I think that's it. Like, it's not a super sexy, mind-blowing proposition, but I really think it is. And I think it is amazing how few people just stop and do that mental exercise of, what do I like about this job? And like, what do I not like about this job? And when I look at the things that I like, is there a pattern there? Is there a theme? What do those things have in common? And when I look at things that I don't like about this job, is there a pattern or a theme there? What are the things I not like have in common? And if it's like, oh, well, I don't like interfacing with bureaucracy, that's fine. You probably shouldn't go work for the United States government. It's just, whatever your weird thing is. I did not like writing grants. I did not like asking people for money for my research. I did not like asking permission to get my stuff published. And, you're talking to a guy who's published thousands and thousands of articles and podcasts and things in a 20-year career. I just put them on my own website at this point. It's crazy. Like, it's like, I own the place. I can publish whatever I want. It's bonkers, but like, that was just a thing for me, was, playing that game. And it was just a thing that I like to be able to get excited about things and create them and put them into the world. And I don't like being told, no, we're not going to run your article about how, vet medicine is like Yahtzee. Damn it, I'm going to make this Yahtzee article and people are going to like it and I'll write it.
And they do, and it's memorable. And
I don't know that they do. I don't know that they ever go for the Yahtzee vet medicine article. But thank you for saying that.
Well, and before, because I can't stop thinking about, because I'm really curious, and I'm always interested in looking at other industries and how can we learn. But going back to what your dad said, and I feel this because my dad is also a doctor for people. And I also understand the wanting to do something that impresses him. What was it that your dad was noticing about some changes within medicine that he would say that warning?
Yeah. So one of the big things for there's a couple of things for him. So he always ran his own place. So he was a general surgeon. So that's the first thing. He was a general surgeon. And the value or perceived value of general surgeons has gone down and down and down and down. And it's just because of how medicine is set up from an insurance standpoint. Is if you are, a hand specialist or an oncosurgeon, you can charge these prices to insurance because you're an oncosurgeon. But if you're a general surgeon, then you kind of get lumped into this different barrel or this different bucket. And it was just, over the course of his career, his income just went down and down and down and down as more and more things went to like hyper specialized practitioners. And that's not trying to be knock on anybody, but it's just the way it was. But one of the things that I just deeply admired was the fact that he fix anything. He would do breast cancer surgeries, and he would do lacerations and stab wounds, or broken bones, or people would have skin growths like derm stuff, and he just fixed it all. And it was just, we would have people in the neighborhood, and they'd be by, and they'd be like, "Look at this thing on my face," and he'd be like, "Come by the office, I'm gonna take that off." And he just did. And like, that's just how we rolled. This was medicine in the 80s and 90s. And that's just how we rolled. And then as medicine sort of changed, one specialization became more and more and more. And so his ability just to fix this and fix that and do this and do that, I think that got less and less. And so those cases ended up going to other places. And I think that really bothered him. The other thing was the rise of doctor groups. And, people talk about sort of corporatization of human medicine, but it wasn't really that. And from my understanding, but it was other doctors would sort of come together and they would form these doctor groups. And if you weren't in their group, they would not refer cases to you. And he did not want to be in one of these big groups and have, a bunch of partners, and like, he just wanted to run his own little place. And so as these groups formed up, they wanted him to come and take call at the hospital and things like that, but they didn't want to, they didn't want to send him any work. They wanted to either say, "You need to come join our group, have some control over you, or we're just not going to send you any business." And my dad is one of those guys that if you don't try to make him do anything, and I kind of have some of those tendencies as well, probably not as much as him, but I have some of those tendencies. But he just wasn't going to do it. And so over time, he got fewer and fewer cases because the groups would kind of keep stuff internally, and then the groups would always refer to the most specialized person in the group, because they're like, "Oh man, if the hand surgeon in our group can bill, $75,000, let's not send them to the general surgeon." You know what I mean? And again, I'm not trying to be anti-hand surgeon, but you're just making up examples. But it was that type of stuff, you know what I mean? And so he just worked more and more, and he earned less and less. I think he felt less appreciated. handling insurance and the paperwork. It was just a bigger and bigger part of what he was doing. And I think really probably the defining thing was not so much the money. I think he felt unappreciated. I think that working more and more and making less and less money, I don't think it was about the money. I think it was about feeling he was being less and less appreciated over time. So I think that was a big thing that spoke a lot sort of to him and sort of his decision, and to sort of say, I don't know that I would do this. And so anyway, I think it was a lot of those sort of different kinds of things. But I think the big part probably was he was not able to just help people. And he said it to me a number of times. It was like, he's just not allowed to help people. There's just so much red tape around being able just to do stuff. And I think that really, I think I got fairly disenchanted, I think, by the end. It was funny. He retired, and I was really, well, I think about retirement every now and then. It's just kind of interesting about where you go in your life. And, I was really worried about him when retiring, because he was one of those guys he was Dr. Roark, like that's what he was. And everyone knew him, and he just rolled in and he did his stuff, and he was great at it. And it was how he was known. And my thought was always like, how are you going to put that down? Like, how do you put that down when that's this identity that you have? And I think I underestimated the old man. It turns out it was not his identity. And he was like, no, I'm going to be good. And he retired, and he did not renew his license. And I'm like, don't you want to renew your license to go do Doctors Without Borders or things like that? And he was like, no. He was like, you have no idea how many people I've helped in my career. And like, I did it, and I'm glad I'm done. And so he didn't renew his license, and he was just done. And so he just immediately picks up other hobbies, and he's just doing landscaping, and he was doing landscaping and gardening in his yard. And now at this point, his yard can't contain him. He basically landscapes the whole neighborhood. He's in other people's yards. I don't know that they know that he's there, but he's planting stuff. And so he's just doing that. He's like 70 something. He's real into pickleball. He's got a lot of pickleball going on. He's got beehives. He's just doing everything. So anyway, he gets called to go back to the hospital after it's been like 10 at this point it was 5 years. It was 5 years since he was gone. And he gets called back because the hospital is redoing their landscaping, and they were like, hey, we should see what Dr. Roark thinks about it. So they ask him to come and look at their landscaping plants. And so he shows up, and he walks in, and there was this guy who was like one of the orderlies who had been there. And when Dad retired and he left the hospital, he never went back. And so he walks in for first time in 5 years, and there's this orderly who knew him, and the guy goes, it's the legend, like that, as he comes in the door. But it was just this idea of it all. Apparently, the human doctors are kind of like, it's kind of like a fraternity, and there's a lot of people struggle a lot when they leave, right? When they retire, because it's your identity. And so, he had sort of decided he was not going to be the person who retires and then comes back and has lunch at the cafeteria, or comes out and hangs out in the doctor's lounge. He was like, no, I'm done. I'm out. And he just walked away. And like, I have rolled that around. We're talking about careers and, and sort of lives. And like, I'm still not exactly sure what to make of it, but I think that there's something there as far as just going hard on what you want to do, and then just being done and just being able to put it down and just like decide that you're enough as you are without it, or decide that you're going to invest yourself in different ways and just not try to hold on to the last phase of your life. So I don't know. That's the answer to your question of, Andy, what does your dad do with his time?
I think that's a great moral of the story. You are very good at being able to put a moral into stories. So I think that was right on. So I guess since you got to watch your dad be a general surgeon, help, whatever walks in, he can fix it. Is that what inspired you to go into a general practice on the veterinary side?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Like there's great stuff that, like, yes, I mean, so much. I think this is why I was so excited about that mess when I got there, and I was just like, this is amazing. Like, think about it. We've given away a lot of autonomy. Like we've just decided that we need to refer these things away to specialists, and sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. But I can go off and talk about that all over the place. But the truth is, when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, we have the power to put our hands on just about anything and fix it. Like we can cut GDVs, we can do orthopedics, we can plate broken bones. We like as a general practitioner, like if you're up for it and you're willing to pursue the education and training and you're willing to try things and be communicative and open with pet owners about who you are and what your your qualifications are, and but there's nothing holding us back. And here's, I'm really gonna wax poetic here for a second. Like we have this power to do these things and put our hands on whatever cases we want. And if you want to go and get advanced training in ultrasonography, you can do that. You can be a badass ultrasonographer. You don't have to be a doctor. Man, I'm seeing technicians now that are starting to do some of these programs where they get an ultrasound unit that's got a virtual radiologist, and the radiologist coaches the techs on how to move their hands and what they're looking for, and then they get their reports. And you can train a technician in months to a year or two. After a while, they don't need the radiologist to tell them what to do. They know exactly what they're looking at. And if you pay attention and you read the reports and you do it like very quickly, you could train yourself to be a badass ultrasonographer. We have a lot of I run a company called Uncharted that is a business development company and conference, and we've got practices now that have these technicians that are just cranking through ultrasounds in their hospital. I remember being a young doctor and coming out, and like we had some people who could kind of do ultrasound, but it was always kind of it was a dream. And now it's just like, oh man, it's not even like we've got doctors that do this, we got techs that do it. But you, I mean, if you want to do that, if you want to be a badass dentist, go and do some of the continuing education stuff that's like the wet labs, the deep dives. Like you can get in there and you can really learn those skills. And if that's your jam, you can go and make it happen. And I'll go even a step further than that. What really got me fired up about the business side of medicine was the fact that you can still be an independent practice owner if you want to. You can wade in there. You can decide, I want to be a mobile doctor. I want to be a holistics practice. That's what, like I was hanging out with one of my good friends. She's a veterinarian in California, and she runs this house call holistic practice, and she's crushing it. I mean, she's having, her big struggle is trying how to set boundaries because she's got too many clients and people that want to see her. And she's like, no, I don't want that life. I just kind of want to have this number of clients and do this thing. And you can make that. And you don't even have to be, you don't even have to be the practice owner. You can be a medical director. You can work, across multiple clinics, working with teams, trying to work on building culture, on supporting people, and having this influence into what the workplace is like. You can make that stuff. You can have a massive influence on what the client experience is and how it feels to come into a clinic. Like, you can't do any of that stuff in human medicine. Everything is regulated. Everything is tied down to bureaucracies and regulations and stuff. And I'm not saying there's not reasons for that. I'm not an anarchist here. But God, you got to recognize the beauty of that medicine. Like, it's so flexible. And so what it is flexible. And then the things that are tangential to it are basically endless, like that medicine's a house with 1 million rooms.
I think you're a natural storyteller. Have you always been good at this?
I don't know. I think so. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to talk. This is not Andy's dad story hour, but my dad could always tell a story. I think that's where I really learned it. Is he was a very introverted guy, but man, he could tell a joke and he could tell a story. I know I have a lot of his mannerisms. There's ways that he kind of hides the punchline and then kind of pauses and leans forward, and he has this little smile around his eyes. And I know I've picked those things up because people have said those things to me. I didn't really know it. I didn't. I've always been a creative person. I like stories. I like stories and things, but I never thought of myself that way. The big thing that happened for me was I got to Florida, and I kid you not, I had been interested going into vet medicine about owning my own practice. And I was like, yeah, you know what? This is a thing that I can see. Again, going back to what your strengths are and things. And I go, yeah, the creative part of me really liked the idea of sort of having my own place. That would be something that I thought was special and unique. I had this crazy idea for like a combination dog park vet clinic that may or may not serve alcohol. Like, I think that was, oh, come on, I was like 29. Like, who knows? But that was I had this sort of like crazy creative idea of what the thing could be. It was all very fetal, but it was still this idea that I had. And so I get to Florida, and they're having like the welcome days, like the first 2 days. So they roll out all the clubs, right? So they got the canine club, the feline club, the shelter medicine club, and the food animal club, and all that sort of stuff. And this new club called the VBMA is the Veterinary Business Management Association, which is just getting started nationally. And there's this guy named Dr. Mike Wong, and he was not Dr. Wong at the time. He was just Mike Wong. So Mike Wong is a senior, and I'm in my first year, and he's really quiet and really introverted. It turns out he's absolutely brilliant. He owns a neurology practice now that spans it's called Southeast Veterinary Neurology, and he's got like 10 neurologists that work for it. He's crazy. It's this huge place. Yeah, it's multi-location. The guy's a certifiable genius. Also one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Anyway, he comes up there, and he's in his 4th year in vet school, and he's very reserved, and he says, we're starting the business club, and if you're interested in learning more about running your own practice, you can come up and talk to me. Just let me know. We have officer positions available. Thank you very much. And he left. And as soon as we were done, I raced to the library, because this is before people had cell phones. And so I've run to the library and I bang out this email and like, hey, I know everybody's trying to talk to you. I really want to get involved. I would like an officer position. He wrote back. He was like, no one else has contacted me. And so that's how I got involved in the VBMA, was that. And so anyway, so I ended up doing this thing in the VBMA. And so I was jumping there and I helped Mike. And basically he was kind of very quickly, he was in the back half of his 4th year, and he was graduating and leaving. And he was like, well, you can kind of, why don't you kind of run this? And so I did. So I jumped in and I spent the entire budget for the club in like 3 weeks. And I was like, yeah. And I started buying stuff. And then I was crying. And they're like, oh, we don't have any more money, Andy. And so I was like, oh, crap. And so I was like, I will go get us more money. Like, I will go and find sponsorship. I'll find support for this thing. This is a great idea. Business education is so important. I know that people will give us money to have business education. We just got to figure out how to ask them. And the guy just had the enthusiasm that I have right now, just telling the story. It's kind of rolls off of me because I just love it. And so it's just this big thing of, can I get people to help us do this thing I'm excited about? And what I really came to believe is, if you've got a genuinely good idea, you can always find money. You just got to believe in it, and you got to be willing to do the work and put yourself out there. And so I was, diving into elevators with pharma representatives as they were trying to leave, and be like, let me tell you about what we have going on. And so ultimately, I started raising money, and the next thing you know, a year has gone by, and now I'm the national president of this organization, because they're like, oh, this guy's fundraising monster. Let's let him run the whole thing. And so I went to the national meeting for the VBMA, and there was 250 vet students or something there, and I was terrified, but they were, the people around me were like, okay, well, this is sort of like a pep rally, like, go and tell them what the VBMA is going to do and why they should be excited about being members. And I just started talking, and I was running around, and I was excited, and people were like, that was amazing. That was amazing. And so then I kind of got pushed into it in a way, because the rest of the team, they didn't want to go and speak in front of these people. And so they were like, all right, Andy, you got it, go. And they told me I was good. And there's conversations in your life that are these pearls, right? Like these shining beacons. And I remember this guy, he was a 3rd year in vet school, and I was in my 2nd year. I didn't know him all that well, but after it was over, I went back there, and he just had his hands on the side of his head, and he was like, that was Andy up there, and he was killing it. Like, that was amazing. And the fact that I didn't know him that well was what made it. It was my friend. I would have been like, oh, thanks, buddy. But it was this person I didn't know. And why does that guy's opinion matter? I don't know. But it did to me in that moment. It was like, he gave me permission, which is completely messed up. One of the things that holds so many people back is this idea that I need permission to do this thing that I want. I think we're all looking, maybe I didn't need permission, but he validated what I was feeling. And I was just like, I'm just going to go and just share my heart with them. And he was like, that was amazing. And I was like, really? Yes. And so that was just like the green light to do this thing. And again, none of this makes sense for a vet student to be doing. Like that is, like, I didn't get graded on any of this. I actually, at one point, I had the dean of the vet school said to me directly, he was like, Andy, if you spend a little bit less time on your business stuff and a little bit more time on your studies, I think you would probably have a better GPA. And I was like, I think you're probably right. It worked out okay for me, I'll tell you. But yeah, he was like, I think maybe you should. You know what would happen if I gave up the business stuff that I love to work on my GPA? My GPA would have been a half a point higher, and I would not be doing what I love with my life. We all kind of make those calls. Anyway, that's kind of how it got started. It's a long story to come around to the point of, I don't know. I really cared about what I was doing. I was really excited about it. And I decided that instead of being afraid, I was just going to share my excitement. And then I had the couple of people who just happened to be standing there. So yeah, I'll pull a couple of rules out of this. As one is like, man, if you got something you love, go do it. Don't you dare let fear hold you back. Just put yourself out there. And the other thing is, you never know when you're that random person who just leans over to someone you don't know that well and gives them some encouragement that means the world to them in that moment. Like, you never know when they're tottering on the edge between going forward and stepping back, and you step up and with just a little bit of encouragement, and you give them the courage to step over the edge and off into the thing that they want to go after. And so, always just file that away. It's never wrong just to step up and pat somebody on the back, even if you don't know them that well.
Amen on that one. I mean, even going back to what you were talking about with your dad and not feeling appreciated, I think it doesn't matter if you are the owner of a practice or the janitor. You can offer those types of things to anyone and they will appreciate it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you never know what people are going through, and just, I don't know. It's I don't know, it just means a lot to people. Everybody's trying hard, but it's funny. We as veterinarians, we talk about training all the time. And we talk about, most of us are done with negative reinforcement training. We don't use that when we talk about dogs and cats. It's positive reinforcement. Yet we generally suck at positively reinforcing each other. You know what I mean? Like, we're like, oh, how do you manage the technicians? Well, if they mess up, they get in trouble. I'm like, well, that's a terrible. Is that how you train, your patients? And again, I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how many degrees you have. You're a simple animal. This is not about techs. It's about doctors. It's about PhD, DVM, MBAs. They're all simple animals. We all work the exact same way. And so the positive reinforcement is so important. But man, we just don't do it. People should do what they're supposed to do. And if they don't, then they get in trouble. And I'm like, it's just kind of a broken mindset. But the good news is, if you buy into that, I will tell you that because nobody seems to be giving out positive reinforcement very well, when you do it, you will make a big impact on people. And so you have great power to celebrate people when you see them doing things that are helpful or beneficial or positive. Like, everybody wants to feel appreciated. So we've got that opportunity to pat people on the back and call out wins, and you'll be amazed at how you motivate people. Again, that's one of my big things for leaders, is stop trying to figure out how to force people to do stuff or how to catch them when they mess up, and start figuring out, what does a positive reinforcement model look like? If I can train my dog not to jump up on people using positive reinforcement, you can figure out how to train, your practice manager to, put in protocols in your practice to make the culture better. You just have to figure out how to positively reinforce those behaviors.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could have been a famous speaker, writer, running the practice of your dreams, everything your way. But why take it a couple steps further? Why create an entire event, Uncharted, and all the things that you've built? Why leadership in this topic as well?
Well, a lot of it goes back to just figuring out what you enjoy and what you're good at and doing more of it. And the other thing is, I get bored. Like, I am one of those people who gets bored pretty fast. And so, when I started off, my oldest daughter was born when I was in vet school. So I was in my 4th year of vet school, and my wife, Allison, She had just gotten her PhD when our daughter Jacqueline was born. It's funny how where you are in your life drives a lot of the choices that you make. And I think we all push ourselves really hard to have this master plan. Like, this is where I'm going to be in 5 years, or this is what my job is going to be. And the truth is, you have no idea what you're going to want or need, or what your life is going to be in 5 years from now. You got no idea. And so, for a long time, I was like, am I going to do an internship? Am I not going to do an internship? What kind of an internship would I do? And the truth is, I get there and I was like, I got a baby. I got to go work. I got to go. I got to go to work. And again, not getting internships, but that's just where I was. And so, I end up sort of getting a job and going to work. And Facebook was a brand new thing. It had just opened up. It was 2008. It would just open up into the world. And so I had a baby and I wanted to share pictures with my family, and people were getting on it. And I was like, this is an opportunity. I can use this thing and sort of communicate with my family. Cause we moved up to Washington, DC to practice. And I didn't have family up there. My brother was sort of spread off somewhere else. He was down in Florida at the time. And I've got family. I come from the Appalachian Mountains. And so I got mountain family and stuff. And it was just, they want to be involved. And so I was like, there's this tool. I'm going to start doing this thing and posting these pictures. And then I started sort of telling jokes, because my daughter's very loquacious. She's very precocious. She's very precocious. She was a princess. She wore the plastic high-heeled, slippers and things. And she talked. She loved her daddy, and she just bend my ear about whatever she was thinking. And God, she was funny. And so I've got these pictures and I'm telling these stories about the things my daughter is saying, and people liked it. And I started getting all these likes on Facebook, which again, that's that positive reinforcement. And then I started taking some pictures of the clinic and telling jokes. And coming out from the VBMA stuff, I got an offer to write some, and I said, I'll try, see how it goes. And so now I'm writing a little bit and I'm sharing it on there, and now it kind of starts to spin up and everything. And I'm like, oh man, I'm enjoying this. And again, at Facebook back in the day, it was great fun. And my friends were there, and I like telling jokes and making fun stuff. And then after I wrote for a while, the guys at DVM 360 were like, hey, would you come and do some lectures on the things that you've been writing about? And I said, well, I think I can probably do that. And so I went and tried it. And then they had a film crew there, and they were like, yeah, we're trying to use this film crew, but we don't really know what to make. And they were doing some kind of interview stuff that seemed pretty boring. And I was like, you know what? I think we could make some funny stuff with your film crew. And they were like, the film crew guys were hilarious, because they were like, oh, please God, yes. Like, let us make something. Let us make something that is different from the things that we have been making. And they were all gung-ho. So then I'm making these goofy videos, and again, right place at right time. It's social media was getting going, and so that stuff sort of just takes off. And now I'm writing and I'm making videos, and it kind of keeps spiraling up until at some point, I've been traveling and speaking and lecturing for 15 years, and I'm always interested in what works and what doesn't work. And so at some point, I kind of sat down and I was like, man, some of the events I go to are absolutely amazing, and some of them are not so much, and some of them are less than not so much. And I think I know why. And if my theory on why some of them are good is true, then I can turn the volume up on the things that I think make these good. And I can make something that's unlike anything else. And so that's kind of where Uncharted came from, was this idea of like, I got a pretty good idea what makes these things really special, what really affects people, and what really helps them make changes in practice. And so I decided I was going to go for it. And so I saved up my money, and I figured out what it was going to cost. And I wrote emails to a bunch of people that I knew, like personally inviting them to come, because I didn't want to lose my shirt. And lo and behold, it actually worked, and they came. And I think that we've learned through didactic lecture for a long time, but I don't think that that's the best way to learn. And there's a lot of research that backs up that it's really not. And we've got some of the new vet schools that are coming out. They don't do lecture, they do case studies, and they do hands-on learning. And I think it's time to do that with leadership and business development. And so we decided to try it out and see what that would look like, and sort of launch the conference. And so we did. And now I've got a dozen employees, and it's this huge thing. And I never planned for it to be this way. It just was. And I kept saying yes to the things I wanted to do, and kept sort of saying no to the things that I didn't really want to do. And now here we are. But yeah, it's been a long, winding road, but it has continued to be that sort of looking around and saying, where am I? What do I want to do? And where to go from here? But I just want to really emphasize it was never the master plan. The master plan was for me to own a vet hospital, which never happened. Like that was that was always the goal. In that case, I've been a complete and total failure. Like in that regard, I have absolutely failed at my goal that I set out to accomplish.
I don't think anyone would call you a failure.
I was I was speaking and traveling and doing some of the stuff, and so I had cut my days at the clinic down to like 3 days a week. So I would do like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, something like that, and then every other Saturday. And then I was doing consulting work for some companies and writing and speaking and stuff. And so it was like a Tuesday, and my wife comes home early from work, and so she comes home early. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I am in the pool on one of the big inflatables floating around. And she comes home, and so I said to her, "Hey, you seem really happy with your job, and you're on this tenure track at this college, and things are good here. I think it might be time for me to buy that vet clinic I've been talking about." And she said, "You're out of your mind." And I said, "Why do you say that?" And she said, "Do you know why people buy vet clinics? So, so that one day, if they're lucky, they can float around in the swimming pool at 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, good point." But again, like we get so tunnel visioned about like what the plan is that we often don't look at all the great stuff that we have, and we don't look at the, you know what I mean, at the opportunities. I don't know. I've never forgotten that. I've never been able to argue her off at that point. I thought that she wanted me to own a vet clinic because that's what I had always wanted, and she never told me that she was like, "Hey, I'm officially at a place where I don't care." And so that was a news to me that this was not the expectation of my spouse. And it was a pretty solid point of like, I gotten so fixated on this idea that I was going to have this thing, I had stopped asking myself why.
Oh, I think that is so important. The tunnel vision, what I think I should do or what other people think I'm supposed to do, when especially the people who we care about most and care most about us just want us to be happy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly. I mean, it's exactly that. And there's so much fear to it. So my wife is a college professor, and she's in biology, and she's at a very good school. And the number of these college kids that come in who have decided that they're going to be pre-med is enormous. And a lot of them don't show any real aptitude for science or medicine. And they don't seem to really enjoy like science classes. Yet the idea of them not going to medical school completely terrifies them to
Mm.
the point that they cannot give it up. And it's like, I think there's so much pressure on especially young people in America, but there's this pressure of you're supposed to have a plan and you're supposed to execute that plan. And having a bad plan is better than not having a plan. And I think that that's the narrative that a lot of people get. And that's insanity. Like, there's nothing worse than a bad plan, for God's sakes. But uncertainty is terrifying. And so a bad plan at least has some certainty to it, as opposed to having no plan and saying, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure it out." But I think that there's a lot of really unhappy people who made a plan for themselves 15, 20 years ago, and they could not stand the fear of questioning their own plan. So they just kept going ahead. And when they were unhappy, they told themselves not that maybe I should reassess my plan. They told themselves this is a requirement for me to complete my plan. And I'm confident that when I get through it, I will be happy. And buddy, I think that's why a lot of people break in their 30s and their 40s. I mean, we've got a huge problem of depression and burnout in vet medicine. I do think a big component of it is that a lot of people have held on to the idea that they're going to be happy in the future. They're going to be happy when they hit this milestone. And at some point, you can't keep telling yourself that, because at some point you look around and you go, what's going to be different in a year? What's going to be different in 5 years? When you're in vet school, you can tell yourself it's going to be different when you get done and you practice. I don't know how true that is, but you can tell it to yourself. But at some point when you get out, you just can't keep telling yourself that when I get to this place, I'm going to be happy, because you've passed all the milestones you thought were going to make you happy. I think that really breaks people.
Yeah. So I do remember listening to a podcast episode where you talked about you yourself experienced burnout a few years ago.
Sure.
So are you comfortable sharing a little bit about, after all, everything we've talked about, and we're talking about some reasons that some people do burn out, what was it for you?
Yeah. So yeah, it was like 2019, and I ended up getting really burned out and really depressed. I got really depressed. And it was a combination of a number of different things. One thing was that, as you go along in life, I had this idea that there was something that I would achieve at some point, and it would make me know that I was successful. And it would make everybody else know that I was successful. And I would be worthy. And I don't know what that meant, but that's how I felt. I made this story. And so is it okay if I tell you sort of a silly story and then
Please.
come back? So I had this story that I wrote when I came out the other side, because it's the best explanation of what happened to me. So in this story, there is this child, and she's out playing in the forest, and she's playing under this great tree, which is called the world tree, right? And the world tree is kind of the center of everything. And there's a raven, and the raven is always sort of a clever creature in sort of mythology. And so the raven comes down and says, he decides he likes this child. So he comes down to her and he says, I have a gift for you. It's a quest. And she says, oh, what is that? And he says, there's a dragon. There's an amazing dragon that everybody knows about, and they all talk about, and everyone is aware of it. And this dragon needs to be slain. And if you slay this dragon, then everyone will know about you and how amazing you are, and you will do a great deed for the world. And so she's like, all right, I'll do this thing. And so she puts down her toys and she picks up her little backpack and she heads off to go find this dragon. And then she spends the next 30 years exploring, and she climbs the highest mountains, and she wades through the deep dark swamps, and she crosses the fields. She learns to ride horses, and she fights battles that matter and battles that don't. She has a family, she has children, she falls in love, she learns medicine, she learns magic, she does all of these incredible things. And after 30 years of questing for this dragon, she finally comes to the dragon's lair, and she climbs the carved stone steps and goes into the lair. And inside, she finds nothing. There is nothing there. And so she waits. Nobody comes. And after a long time, she picks her stuff back up and she heads to the world tree. And she goes there and she finds the raven. And the raven comes down. And she looks at the raven and she says, what the hell? There is no dragon. And the raven says, yeah, I know. But didn't you enjoy exploring? Didn't you enjoy having a reason to climb the mountains and wade through the swamps and cross the valleys and ride horses and fight battles and fall in love and have a family and learn medicine and magic? Didn't you like having a reason to go do that? And she says, yeah. And he says, well, I gave you the reason to go do that. And now you can go out and you can keep doing those things. And you know that there's no dragon. And so I quested for a dragon. I didn't know what it was, but I was confident there was something that was going to make me know I was successful. I had this idea that something would happen, and then the credits would roll on the movie, and it would be happily ever after. And I would be done. I would be successful, and I would be happily ever after. And then I would just stay happily ever after. And that never happened. And in my early 40s, when I was financially successful, I had the career that I wanted, I had a healthy, wonderful family that I loved deeply and a wonderful spouse and everything, I was still figuring out where is this goddamn dragon? And the crushing realization was it's not there, and it's never going to be there. And so anyway, that was kind of it, is where I came to in my early 40s. I'd pushed through vet school, and I'd done the business stuff, and I had grown all these things, and I had done all the things, but there was no happily ever after. And so that was kind of it for me. The whole time too, that you're going on in your life as you roll along. For the most of us, we continue to gain responsibility, and everything that I accomplished led to something larger, which led to something larger and led to something larger. And I thought I was climbing to the top of the mountain that mattered. And when I got to the top of the mountain, everything would make sense, and everything I would be done. I'd be successful. There's this guy, he's a columnist. His name is David Brooks. He writes for the New York Times. He has a book called The Second Mountain. And so David Brooks's idea is that when we're young, we're all sold the idea that there's this mountain, and the goal of life is to climb this mountain. And for you, that mountain might be financial wealth. It might be fame. It might be status. It might be whatever it is. We're all sold this idea. And if you want to know what your mountain is, go look at Instagram and see what Instagram thinks your mountain is, because it's going to show you something. It's going to show you vacations. It's going to show you, beautiful people. It's going to show you whatever. But there's this mountain that we're all sold is going to make us happy if we get to the top. And one of two things happens to us along the way, according to Brooks. We either get to the top of the mountain, which is what I did, because I got there. Ain't nothing there. But I had to get there before I was like, what the hell's going on? And it was devastating for me. Or we give up along the way. At some point, we say, I can't get to the top of the mountain, or I'm stuck here. And then we say, this is not what I was sold. And I didn't get to the top, but I'm stuck here, and I don't see any way up. And what am I doing? And in both of those two cases, what generally happens to people is they have a lot of pain. They have a lot of pain. And then they usually find the second mountain. And so the title of this book is The Second Mountain. The second mountain is this idea that meaning and purpose comes from interconnectivity. It comes from relationships. It comes from being a part of something that's just greater than ourselves. It's not about wealth. It's not about status. It's not about accomplishment or achievement. It's about the people that you surround yourself with, and how you interact, and how you depend on them and they depend on you. I think Brooks is right. I think the meaning of life in a lot of ways is this interconnection and interdependence that we have. And so, yeah, for me, I just kept pushing and pushing to try to find this thing that was going to be the accomplishment, going to be the achievement, and never found it. And finally, the realization that it wasn't there hit me pretty hard, because then what is there? It took me about 9 months to kind of climb out of the hole. It was 3 months of feeling pretty darn bad, and then 6 months of kind of getting my head together and starting to say, well, if this is true and none of this matters, what am I doing? And I had to kind of work my way through that. But it's a journey. A lot of other people have kind of had similar experiences. I'm comfortable talking about it because I know that burnout and depression and things are common in our profession. I think there's a lot of us that we push the boulder and push the boulder and push the boulder, and then finally at some point we just go, what am I doing here? And this is the thing I thought was going to make me whole. Like, the clients are not changing. The clients are not treating me with more respect now that I have 10 years of experience. The cases are not getting easier. My boss is not becoming more enamored with me over time. Like like whatever your thing is, we recognize that. But I decided a long time ago that I'm happy to talk about it, because I think the biggest thing that really scared the hell out of me was I didn't know anybody else who had really burned out and then come out the other side and been okay. I didn't know anyone who had felt like I felt, and was like, you know what? I love my job. Like I love vet medicine. And so I was terrified. I was like, does this mean that I'm done? Does this mean that I'm not going to have this career anymore? Am I never going to be happy again? And so I just decided, I said, I love vet medicine. I love my job. I sort of came out the other side of it. I think I've got a pretty good perspective these days. I'm pretty deeply happy. And so I talk about it because if there's people out there who are like, I'm, I'm feeling depressed or I'm burned out and I don't know if there's a way back, I can tell you, no, there is. It's not easy, but you can be happier after burning out and going through periods of depression or anxiety or whatever. I deeply believe that you can be happier after going through those things than you were before you did. And so anyway, it's just important for me to be able to sort of share that with people.
I agree. So thank you. I appreciate your willingness to share that. You get to that point and you kind of stop and think, well, why am I here? I think we can actually wrap this up into one of my favorite questions to ask at the end. And, you can answer it either way, I guess. One, if you had to say, so why am I here today? Or maybe two, what am I most grateful for that kind of keeps me going? What would your answer be?
Man, what am I most grateful for that keeps me going? When I sort of went through this period, sort of got depressed, I asked myself that question a lot, right? Like, what is the point here? Like, what am I grateful for? And I think everybody's got to find their things. But I had very few sort of, I don't know, wellness strategies that really spoke to me or anything. But there was one that I kind of stumbled on. I kind of bastardized it from what it was supposed to be. But I a lot of people would talk about making gratitude journals or things like that. And never worked for me. Like if you ask me, like, what are you grateful for? I always came back to the same things, and it was never as motivating. I always felt like I would always nod along when people would say, "Oh yeah, gratitude's really important." I'd be like, "Yep, uh-huh." But for me, I never, it was just never a tool that did any good in my hands. Again, I'm not trying to take away from other people. We all got to find our own thing. But it never worked for me. But one thing that I did find, and I don't know how I got this, I was reading something and I kind of twisted it and made it my own. But I decided that what I was going to do was that at the end of every day, I was just going to bullet point at least 3 things that were good about that day, right? Like what was good about today. And I would write the date and then I would write my 3+ things. And then, so I just started doing that to try to feel sort of better about kind of the days and to try to, just to try to start to get some perspective. And I kept doing it. And Megan, after like a year, I suddenly had this book that was a list of the things that were good about my life, and they were not the things you would think they would be. Like basically none of the stuff had anything to do with clinical outcomes. They were things like I had lunch with my daughter, just the 2 of us, and we had a picnic. And I got a call from my friend who I haven't seen in a year. And I bought flowers for my wife and we went to her work party. And I really enjoy some of those people and felt really welcomed at this event. And those are the types of things that filled that book up. And it was just the process of doing that and doing it for so long really honestly changed my perspective about what matters and kind of what I'm grateful for. The answer to your question is I am grateful for the people that I am connected with. I am grateful for my neighbors who, since I went through that period, I know all my neighbors. We have cookouts. We get together and have wine and crackers on Fridays. We watch sports together. We celebrate anniversaries together. I'm excited about my neighbors. I really enjoy my team that I work with. I have some of those people over for board game night. We did our first all doctors gathering because I looked around. We got 10 vets where I work, and like they're awesome, but we don't hang out outside of the clinic. And then honestly, when we're at the clinic, we're also busy, don't really talk. And so we're starting this thing, and I'm driving it. I want to get the doctors together once a quarter to, we met at a brewery and sat outside and had beers and told stories and about, where we came from. And I learned a lot about those guys, but just that kind of stuff. It's about your hobbies. I do improv comedy as a hobby and I love it. I love going and being with those people and doing that stuff. I love that. I've gotten into gardening. That was the best thing that happened to me during the pandemic. And I think it's also just a really good wellness thing for me. I like working with my hands. I like pulling weeds. I like planting stuff. And and now the little old ladies who walk around the neighborhood who are into gardening will see me in the yard and they come up and they say hi and they ask me about things. And like, I freaking love it. Like it's amazing. I love it when clients come in and they're just funny. You know what I mean? And they're just people, but they're quirky. We all have these quirky clients. And like, it makes me laugh. And there's not anything more than that. It's like, no, well, we had this time together and we chuckled and we laughed at their goofy pet. And, I think I got them sort of straightened out and I enjoyed their worldview and kind of what was going on with them. And that has to be enough because that's all there is. There is no dragon. It's kind of my takeaway. And if you've known me very long or known me very well, you've heard me say there is no dragon. And if you ever hear me say there is no dragon, it's the story I referred to before. There's nothing grand that's going to give meaning to all of this and make it come together. There's no dragon. So you got to enjoy the quest, right? You got to enjoy the things on the way. But anyway, I don't know, those clients who just make you laugh. I love that. It makes me so happy.
Yeah. Well, I think you may start it though, because I think it's contagious. So if you approach it that way with happiness and laughing, and then they'll return it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, people are very adept at reading other people. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got as a doctor was there's a piece of behavioral psychology. It's called deep acting. Okay. So superficial acting is if I try to convince you that I like you. Right. And we see superficial acting all the time. It's, when, the maitre d' at the restaurant acts like they're so happy that you're there. They're not happy you're there. They don't care. It's the wait staff, it's the person who checks you in at the hotel. Like, oh, we're glad you're here. Spoiler alert. No, they're not. They don't care. That's superficial acting. Deep acting is not me trying to convince you that I like you. Deep acting is me convincing myself that I like you. I would tell you there's no better single piece of advice for dealing with angry clients than this. It's like, hey, I know this person is frustrated. I know they're mad. I choose to believe that they're a good person and they're trying their absolute best. And I'm going to choose to like them and want to help them. And it's just amazing how often people just they just read it off of you. They see that you want to help them. They see that you're open to them and that you're trying to be a fan of theirs. Like it's incredible. You can honestly just turn a room around so fast. And sure, there's a million things we can do as far as how we approach people, our body language, what we say. But honestly, I'll tell you the truth in my experience is if you can get your head straight, if you can decide that you like this person and that you think they're a good person who's doing their best and you genuinely want to help them, all that other stuff basically takes care of itself in a lot of ways, So anyway, it really is that decision to like people and just to be there. But it's funny, people respond to what you put out to them. If you walk in ready for battle, they will meet you ready for battle. And if you walk in ready to laugh, they'll meet you with a smile.
If you want more Andy, I've got it. I got him to tell his favorite joke. But first, I want to thank you for being here, for being you, for constantly learning and reimagining. Vet Life Reimagined is for you. If you haven't yet, make sure that you are subscribed onto the YouTube channel and go and tell somebody you think would also appreciate this. Again, you are why I love being here. Thank you. Now, 30 more seconds of Dr. Andy Roark. Trying to think of a really fun way to wrap things up. So you talked about improv.
Yeah.
What is your favorite joke?
Let's go. Oh no.
Joke.
My favorite joke. Oh my gosh. So oh boy. So much pressure here.
Of all the questions.
Oh, what do you call a man with plastic foot?
What?
Roberto. That's so bad.
I think that's perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's it. I will tell a dad joke. I will tell a dad joke.